Hello guys, now we're going to do a practical session on permanent workflows and we'll see how can we create a permanent workflow. Suppose you want to disable the people who have not logged in for in past X number of days. That X can be like maybe 365 days or 90 days or as per your business requirement. And you also want to disable all their accounts like AD account or Office 365 account. In such a scenario, permanent workflow would be an apt choice because it runs on a schedule and it would keep looking for people who have not logged in X days and disable their person record as well as all their associated accounts. So let's just take it as an example and create our first permanent workflow. So to create a permanent workflow, I'll start by adding a new package. So to add a new package, you see the ribbon here in the common ribbon, just click on add new package and it opens up a new wizard, and just click on next here, and now it gives you an option to specify the name of the package. So here I'm going to name my package as demo because I'm just creating this package for demo purpose, and click on continue. So now we'll see that it adds the package to the source solution explorer source control. And now to create a permanent workflow under this package, you just right click on that package, say add new item, workflow application, and workflow application permanent, because here we are creating a permanent workflow. So when you click on that, it will open up a new window. Here it gives you an option to change the package if you want to. So if you click on the drop down, you have the list of the packages, but I'll keep the demo package, and you can give a meaningful name to your workflow. So since here we are creating a workflow to disable people and their accounts who have not logged in 365 days or 90 days, that is X days, and we want that day number of days to be configurable, so we'll say X days. So I'll name this workflow as disable people and accounts if no login in X days. So this is the name of the workflow, and got to keep the same thing in the description as well. Just going to insert some spaces so it makes it more readable. Okay. Here we can set the life expectancy, which is nothing but the visibility time frame from the workflow instance process flow. So you can select 3 hours, 3 days, whatever you want to. I'm going to go ahead and select 3 hours. And the priority is basically the order of precedence for the workflow in which it will be executed if there are multiple workflows running at the same time. So I'm going to make it low here and click on OK. So now you see that it has created a workflow named disable people and accounts if no login in X days in demo package, and it gives us a template for the permanent workflow. So as we have spoken about all these activities here given here in the slides, but I'm going to go over them again. So the first shape that you see, it's a claim workflow activity. And if you want to see what it does behind the scenes, you can right click on it and say open or edit original activity, and click on that, and it opens up the activity. And you see there's a code shape here. If you want to see the code behind this code shape, just double click on it and it will show you the code. So now here you see that it claims the permanent workflow. So this is a stored procedure But what basically this function or stored proc does is it claims the existing permanent workflow based on the last time this permanent workflow ran. So suppose you configure the workflow to run every 10 minutes. Then it checks for the last runtime of the workflow, and if it is more than 10 minutes, then it claims it. So this is the claim permanent workflow activity, and if we go back to our workflow, now we see that after the claiming is done, we see that there are two lines one going to the do work code shape and the other one going to the end shape at the bottom. So these two lines basically determines where the workflow is going to, in which direction the workflow is going to go. So suppose this blue line here, if you double click on it, it will show you the rule behind this line. So it says that if there is a workflow, if there is a claimed workflow, then go to the do work, otherwise just exit. So if you right click on it and say select line rule, so if there's a workflow claimed, and then just go to the do work. And if you right click here on this line and say select line rule, if permanent workflow claimed rule, if it is not true, then go in this direction. And permanent workflow claimed rule basically does nothing, but it checks if there is a claimed workflow. If there is one, it goes to the do work shape. This is where you write your own logic. So in this case, we'll be writing the logic to disable people and their associated accounts. And okay, I'm going to close this here. And after it executes the logic, it goes to this activity called update permanent workflow activity. To see the logic behind this, I'll just right click on it and say open edit original activity, and you see it's an activity which has a delay activity, two code shapes that does something. So let's see what it does. First, the update code shape, basically it updates the last runtime for the workflow, and you see it updates the status for the workflow, and it checks if there is a value for the minutes to pause between completed runs, which is the schedule for the workflow. If you set it to 10, it will pause for 10 minutes and then run after 10 minutes again. And if it checks if there is a value for this, and if there is, then it applies the appropriate delay here for this activity, this apply delay shape. So it sets the time duration to whatever the value you have configured for this permanent workflow. So it updates the workflow's last runtime, applies the delay, and after, so it delays for that amount of time. Suppose in this, suppose you have set the minutes to pause between completed run to 10, so it delays for 10 minutes, and then it comes here and it checks if there is a permanent workflow and if it should continue looping. If the workflow is active and there is a permanent workflow, then it continues looping here. So if we go back, there's again a line rule. This line rule is a continue looping rule, which says if it is continue looping, then go to do work, otherwise exit the workflow. So if you select the line rule and see continue looping, okay, and select line rule, if continue looping, if this rule is not true, then exit the workflow. Okay, so now we're going to start writing our code. So to write your code, just double click on this do work shape here. If you click on the style full edit, it's going to open just the editor so that you can have a better view. Okay, So here we are we want to get the people who have not logged in past X number of days, suppose 365 days, and disable those people and all their associated accounts. So let's just go to the database and see if we have such people. So we have a table called person, which has all the master person records of Empower ID. And I already have a query here which gives me the people who have not logged in 365 days and are not deleted and are active. So I'm just going to run this query and see. So I have 4 records here. So now you see that out of the 4 records, 2 are anonymous and Empower ID system. So if you see at the person table, select all from person, you see that the first 3 person records are anonymous, Empower ID admin, and Empower ID system. These are the person records that are shipped with Empower ID. So we do not want to delete or disable or do anything with these records. So I'm going to exclude those. So I'm going to say and person ID not in 0, 1, 2. So we see really we have 2 people who have not logged in the system for past 365 days. So I want to delete these people and all their associated accounts if they have any. So let's see if these people have any accounts. So the account table in Empower ID database, it gives you the accounts, all the accounts, AD accounts, Office 65 accounts, all the accounts will be in this table, and they will have a foreign key to person. So person ID in 10, 11. So these people, they do have accounts. Each one of them has one account, and let's see if those accounts are disabled or not. So they're not disabled. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and start writing the code. First, what we have to do is we have to get those people who have not logged in past X days. So the best way to do that is writing a stored procedure, because it is more efficient, because you might be dealing with a large number of people, and if you get them all and start processing them one by one to check whether the person has logged in past X days or not, it won't be as efficient. It won't be as efficient as a SQL query. So I'm going to go ahead and create a stored procedure here. With this query, which basically will give us the people who have not logged in past X days. So create procedure e_demo underscore get people lost log in X days ago. So I'm just going to actually copy paste that query we saw here. So here we're basically saying anyone who has not logged in past 365 days and who's not deleted and has an active person record, but person ID is not in this. so it will get us all those people. But if you want this X number of days to be a configurable value, then what we can do here is specify a variable, says number of days, which will be an integer. So we can pass this variable here and it will give us the people who have not logged in these number of days. So you go to run this and we have created the stored proc. So we'll start by calling the stored proc in our code shape. So every component in Empower ID with a person or account has a method called getTlist. So let's see how it works. Person dot get tlist. So this method basically here, as you see, you can specify the stored procedure name, the timeouts, the start and the maximum length, total count, and the arguments for the stored procedure, the parameters for the stored procedure. So you can call any stored procedure using these methods. Any stored procedure that returns you person object. Suppose you want to create a stored procedure that returns your accounts, then you will there's the same method on the account component also. So if you go to account dot get tlist, you have the same method on the account component as well. So here, since our stored procedure is returning people, I'm going to go ahead and use person object get tlist, and now you can enter your stored procedure name, timeout, you can set it to whatever value you want, setting it to 1200, and start, I want to start from 0, and page length, I want all the records, so int max value, and the parameters, the number of days is number of days. So this I'm creating it as a variable here. We'll create it as a workflow property later. So just this. So here it's going to give me all the people. So where people is equal to this. Now I'll specify my stored procedure name, which is this. I'll copy it from the database and paste it here. So this basically here all the people who have not logged in X days. This number of days we can create it as a property on the workflow and set it to a default value. So I'm going to create a property number of days, which is configurable. So now whenever you decide to change the number of days, you don't have to come back to the workflow and change it. It is going to be a parameter on your workflow and it can be configured from Empower ID web application. So it's going to be an integer. Okay, so we created it as a property and you will see it in the property number of days. So once we get the people, we're going to loop through all these people and get their accounts and disable them. So for each p in people, we want to disable their accounts. So for that we have to get the accounts associated with each person that are not disabled and not deleted. So I'm going to get all the accounts here. Account dot get by person ID, and I'm going to pass in the person ID here, p dot person ID, where account is not deleted, so not deleted, and also it is not disabled. We'll get those accounts. Oops, sorry, I forgot to do this here from A in account. So it gives me a list of all the accounts that belongs to this person, and we'll check if those accounts are not deleted and also not disabled. We'll get all those accounts and convert them to a list of accounts. So here we get all the accounts for this person that are not disabled and not deleted. And now I'm going to loop through all these accounts for each. And disable each of them. Either you can, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disable all these accounts, set the disabled equal to true, and add them to a list of accounts, and I'm going to do a bulk update on them. But there is also a delete method on each account. So if you say disable method on each account, so if you say a dot I don't know why my IntelliSense is not working, but if you say a dot disable, this method basically disables those accounts. So I'm going to disable this. So I'm going to loop through all these accounts. I'm going to loop through all these accounts and set disable equal to true and add them to a list and do a bulk update. So let me just create that list here. So I created a list of disabled accounts, and I'm going to disable this account, set disabled equal to true on the account, and then add it to this disabled account list. So here what I'm getting is, again, getting all the accounts that need to be disabled for this person and setting disable equal to true and adding it to a list. Now if the disabled accounts is not null, that means we find some accounts that are disabled. So we are going to check here basically if there are accounts that are to be disabled, then we are going to do a bulk update on those accounts. Dot update, and I'm going to pass. This method basically takes in a list of accounts that you want to update, so I'm going to pass in this account list. So here we get the accounts, loop through all of them. We get the accounts for this person, loop through all of them, mark disabled as true, add them to a list of accounts that we want to update, and if we find something, check for the null, and if it has disabled account list has accounts, we do a bulk update on those accounts. So also, if you don't want to write all the code in the do work shape, you always have an option to create methods. So this my methods, it gives you an ability to create separate methods, and you can use them anywhere in the workflow. So if you don't want to write all the code in your do work shape, then you can create a method so that your code looks cleaner and is more readable. So I'm going to create a method for whatever we did here. So right click on my methods and say add new custom method, and I will name this method as disable all accounts. You can add a parameter to this method, and I'm going to add a parameter called person ID because that's the only thing which is required for me to get an account, and it's going to be an integer. So, and I can, whatever is your return type, you can specify it here. So I'm going to return a boolean indicating the success or the failure. So okay, so this basically added the method. If you go and expand my methods, you'll see the method here, and if you click on it, this is what it will show. So right now all my code is in the do work code shape, so I'm going to copy it from here and paste it in disable all accounts. Okay, so if everything executes successfully, then I will return true, and I'm going to put this in try catch. And if suppose something goes wrong and it fails to do what it is supposed to, then I'm going to return false here so that we know whether it executes successfully or not. Another thing that is very good for your debugging is adding more tracing. So if suppose something goes wrong, it's always good to have some tracing. So I'm going to add a exception message here. So to add tracing, I have to do the .NET. I'm sure this will be covered in debugging and tracing video session, so I'm just going to use it here. So you have write error or information. In this case, it will go to cat only if there is an error, so I'll select error and say disable all accounts, fail the error, and I'm going to print the error message here. So you can add as much tracing as you want. So I'm going to add some more tracing so that I know what happened when my workflow ran just by looking at the event viewer. Okay. So we're done writing a method for disabling all the accounts. So we'll go back to the workflow designer, and now instead of having all the code here, all we have to do is call our method. So I'm going to remove all that code and say where result is equal to disable. I'm just going to call the method we just created here, and the parameter that we have there is person ID, so I'm just going to pass person ID. So this returns me a boolean whether it was able to disable all the accounts or not. So what I want is, if all the accounts are disabled, then I want to go ahead and disable my person record as well. So if result and again here I'm going to create a list of people that I want to disable and do a bulk update on them. So I'm going to create a list disable people. It's going to be a list of people. So I'm going to set active equal to false on this person and add it to the disabled people list. And I'm going to check if I found people to be disabled. If yes, then I am going to do a bulk update on those people. So I am doing it on a bulk update because that is more efficient than making a database call for each person, because if you have large number of records, then it might not perform that well. So doing it in bulk in one database call is always better. That's why I'm doing a bulk update here. So now I did a bulk update on all these people, so it will mark them as disabled. So again, I'm going to add some more tracing, put this in try catch. So just put this in try catch. And we are going to add more tracing. Error occurred in disabled people and accounts. So I'm going to put the workflow name here so that we know where the error was. You can add some more tracing as you want, if you want. So that you know the work was started. And I'm going to add something here, and similarly. Actually, sorry, this should be out of this loop. I didn't see that I had it inside the for each loop. So So we can also add here. Oops. I wanted to copy paste the tracing. So it basically tells us how many people the workflow found to be disabled. So I think we're pretty much done with our workflow. So if we go over it again, this workflow basically gets the people who have not logged in X number of days, which is a configurable number, and it will be on our workflow as a parameter, and we can set this value. And we have made it generic so that if we change our mind about the number of days, suppose you think that no, I want people who have not logged in 90 days to be disabled instead of 365, you don't have to come back to the workflow and change this number. You can do it in Empower ID web application, because this parameter is configurable now. And then we loop through all the people who have not logged in X number of days and disable all the accounts. So we created this method disable accounts here, which basically gets all the people, and we're passing a person ID to that method. So this method basically gets all the accounts for this person that are not deleted and are not disabled. And also this should be an information here, disabling all accounts for the person. It's not an error, it's just the information that we want to print out. Okay, so, and also this one here should be right information and not error. So we get all the accounts for this person that are not deleted and not disabled, and we loop through each of these accounts, set the disabled to true and add them to a list, and later check if we have anything in that list, if we have any accounts in that list. If we do have, then we do a bulk update on those accounts and log a message saying it disabled it successfully, and it returns true or false based on whether it disabled the accounts or not. We go back here, after disabling the accounts, if we check the result whether it disabled the accounts or not, if it disabled the accounts for that person successfully, then we go ahead and disable that person, again add him to a disabled people list, check if we have anything in the list after looping through all the people, and then do a bulk update. So that's pretty much it. So we'll go ahead, and the next step is to compile the workflow and see if we have any errors. And if we do have any errors, we're going to go ahead and fix them. Okay, so it failed, and it failed at line 350. Disabled people does not exist in the current context. Now suppose you want to see where it is. You go to the source code, go to line, and type the line number that it showed in the error, line number 350. So here, this is the error. It's not disabled people, it's disabled people, so it's just a typing error. So we go back to the workflow designer and we fix it. Do not fix anything, any code change in the source code, because it is always overridden by what you do in workflow designer. So whatever changes, the fixes that you're making should be in the workflow designer and not source code. So the other error was at line 850. Okay. I think I know what that is. So go to disable all accounts. This is an integer and this is a string, so I'm going to convert this integer to a string. Okay. Compile it again and see. Okay. The name P does not exist in the current context. So we'll go to source code 856. Here. So there's no P, it's just the person ID that we're passing. Oops, sorry. Okay. Okay, so it compiled successfully. So now since it compiled, now we are going to compile and publish this workflow. So this is the publish workflow wizard. Just hit on next. This is the server on which you want to publish. Just check it's already checked, so I'll click on next. It's publishing the workflow. So here it prompts us after publishing to create a request workflow. So we'll create a request workflow for it. Hit yes. So the request workflow is basically a resource in Empower ID. So the users, they never interact with the workflow directly. They interact with the request workflow, and it is one of the resource types that is registered in Empower ID. It basically determines who can interact with this workflow, because all the resources in Empower ID are the protected resources. So we have a resource type for request workflow, and user always interacts with the request workflow, and it controls who may have access to this workflow. So I think the window popped up behind the IDE. So this is the add request workflow, and we can add description to it. If you check, it has an option to check allow anonymous access. If you check this, anyone can run this workflow. Any anonymous user can run this workflow, but we want only designated people to run the workflow, then we will not check this. But it doesn't make a lot of sense in context of permanent workflow, because permanent workflows, they're just like a job which run on a schedule. So we'll just leave that and hit OK. We're going to restart the services. Okay, cancel. Let's see the since the services were not running, so we didn't see them there. So I'm just going to start the services, and so now we are going to configure this workflow in Empower ID web application. So just so we'll just log into the Empower ID web application. So under resources, we have workflows. To search your workflow, just type in the name. So you see the workflow that we just created, disable people and account if no login in X days. Click on that. Now, this is the whatever we are seeing here is the request workflow for our workflow. So we are going to tag this request workflow as permanent workflow so that it appears in the permanent workflow page and we can configure it. So why I'm tagging it here is because now if you go to the permanent workflows, admin miscellaneous permanent workflows, I'm going to open it in a new tab. Here, so if I want to add a new permanent workflow to configure it, configure the variables, I can give a name to my workflow which can be the same name. So but I'll have to select a request workflow for this permanent workflows, but I will not be able to see it. That workflow doesn't exist because it has not been tagged as a permanent workflow. So we have to go back and tag it as permanent workflow, hit save. So now we have it here. And if you remember, we created a property called number of days and we wanted it to be configurable. It's a parameter on the request workflow. So now we're going to add that parameter to the request workflow. But we have to keep in mind that the name of this parameter should be exactly the same. So when we go here and request workflow parameters, add and say number of days, the name should be exactly the same. And I want to disable all the people who have not logged in past 1 year, 365 days. I'm going to hit save and it's a request workflow parameter now. So if you want to change the value of this parameter to any other value, all you have to do is click on edit and change it to suppose 90 and hit save. So it will be really simple if you change your mind later on. So I'm going to make it 365 and click on save. So we have this here. Now just want to copy the same name from here. Okay, you'll refresh it and you can give any name you want. I'm just giving the same name. You can configure this value minute to pause between runs, which we know will set the idle time needed between each run of the permanent workflow. So suppose you want the workflow to run once per day, then you can set it to 1440. If you want the workflow to run every 10 minutes, then you can set it to 10 minutes. So basically this is the amount of idle time which is needed which is needed between each run of the permanent workflow. So I'm going to set this value to 30 minutes because I don't want my workflow to run that frequently. And maximum items to process in a loop, I want the workflow to process 1000 items. And enable it means we are activating this workflow, and if you don't check this, even though you have configured everything else, this workflow is not going to run. So I'm going to enable this workflow and select the request workflow parameter, and now you see the workflow that we tagged as a permanent workflow. So disable people and accounts if no X login. So now it knows that this is the request workflow for this permanent workflow. I'm going to go and click on save. Okay. Now this workflow will run every 30 minutes. So there's a table in Empower ID database corresponding to this permanent workflow, which is called permanent workflow. So you can go and check in the database. Select all from permanent workflow. So we have a new workflow here which is active, and the last context tells us the last time this workflow ran, which is null because we just created it. It did not run till now. If we go to Empower ID web, click on permanent workflows, even here you can see the last contact and you can see that it is active. It has to run every 30 minutes. And so to run the workflow immediately, I will just stop and start my worker role service, because when it starts, it checks for the workflows that have not been run yet and it tries to run them immediately. So it should run any minute. There's another very important thing that I forgot to mention. There is a permanent workflow job that is required to run these workflows. So we have to make sure that the job is running, because if the job is not running, these workflows will not run, because that job triggers the run of these workflows. So you go to Empower ID Management Console, Configuration Manager, Empower ID Servers and Roles, and all the jobs in Empower ID will be here. So there is a job called a permanent workflow job, and we see that it is enabled, it is checked here. So we are good, we don't have to do anything. So we see that our workflow ran. Just refresh the page and see when if the workflow ran, and the workflow ran a minute ago. So let's just go to the database and verify if it actually disabled those accounts. So they are disabled, and we will check those people. Let's see if we get them in this list. We do not. Also, you can check by going to the person record. So active should be 0 because these people are disabled. So we see that it disabled both the people and their AD accounts. You can verify this in web as well. So if you go here, and I don't know the names of those people, but we can check. It is Jane Doe. Let's just check for one of them. So John Smith. We are checking for John Smith. Go and paste John Smith. This is the guy. How I know is the login name. The login name here is 001, and this guy's name is login name is also 001. So we can see the active is false for this person. We can also see all the accounts of this person. So this is this custom HR account for this person. And that account is also disabled. So this is how you create and configure a permanent workflow. I hope you enjoyed learning this.